I'm gonna hit it up. The one and only Zachary Ames. I'm super excited. This is a brother. Back in '07, started as a founding chapter member of the recolonization at Utah State, and I haven't connected with this guy since New York in '08, something like that. I took my wife to a trip, and this guy was living downtown New York City, and he's like, let me just take you and show you sights. And that was such a fun night. And honestly, from that moment, like, that was the last. You took off, you vanished, and come to find out, you've gone international. You've gotten a bunch of things, and so I'm super stoked to have you here and catch up. But let's start this off with a quick little rundown of Zach Ames. Tell us, where you're at currently, what you're doing, and a little bit about you.
Yeah, so currently I'm back in Salt Lake. So yeah, I was in New York for about 9 years and then Singapore for about 4, doing the corporate thing, and we can maybe talk a little more about that. But recently, about a year ago, right, I don't know where we are in the pandemic. Maybe it was the end, maybe it was the middle. I left Singapore, quit the corporate thing, and I've recently founded my own leadership development consulting firm and coaching business. So been doing that for the last year, just a hair over a year, and in Salt Lake City, Utah at the moment.
Fantastic. So Singapore to Salt Lake City, that's pretty similar culture, pretty similar.
I mean, in some ways,
you're originally
yes,
from
they're
Salt
both,
Lake, right?
Yeah, so born and raised here, Salt Lake, Taylorsville specifically, and then Utah State. So Singapore is very conservative, very similar in many ways. But of course, Asia and international definitely has a different flair and touch to it. So yeah, many similarities, many differences.
Awesome. But you're jumping back into Utah isn't shaking you up because you're from here. So in your time,
no, and skiing,
and that's I remember you like ditching out often, like when there were powder days or something. You'd go up to Beaver Mountain and
gotta go.
You were an avid skier. Yeah, good to know you still got it. I couldn't imagine getting back on the slopes. My body doesn't adjust well to cold anymore. But Zach,
I was going to say, I think it's like a Norway or Swedish saying is there's no such thing as bad weather. It's only bad clothing.
I would hear that when I was up in Alaska, and I should prescribe to that. I just, obviously, living in St. George, I don't have the best clothing. That's my issue.
Fair enough.
So you ended up, tell us when, okay, we're going to go into college and spend some time in college because I want you to reminisce a little bit because this is what it's about, is the good times, man. Yeah. You went to Utah State. Why did you go to, coming from Salt Lake, what made you go to Utah State?
I think there were a few key factors. One, I knew I did not want to go to BYU. 2, all of my siblings went to the U and worked for my dad. He was architect and had a firm there. So my brother was like a draftsman. My sisters were secretaries. And so their whole life was commute and go to school, go to the office, and lived at home and rotate through that day in and day out. And I just kind of saw that and knew I wanted a college experience. I wanted to be away. I had actually applied for schools even outside of Utah. I thought I was going to try to go East Coast. And I remember distinctly, I had one scholarship from one of the universities back there and a half tuition for 1 year. So 50% of my freshman year in a dollar amount was more than my 4-year full ride essentially to Utah State. And so it was a pretty easy economic decision. And I had even talked to other people who had said, if you're going to go into debt, like save that for your master's. Most people in undergrad degrees, it's not worth it and whatnot. So that was kind of the very logical side of it. The emotional side of it is every time there was not one person through that recruitment process that I talked to who went to Utah State who had anything bad to say about it. Like you would hear things about the U, oh, it's a commuter, or BYU, oh, this or that. Or like there were a lot of things about a lot of places that there was always one or two people who had something negative to say. I don't think I heard one person say anything poor about Utah State. And then during all of that, I also was able to do the honors program. So I did undergraduate research, which was unprecedented even at other schools outside of Utah. So that kind of jumping into it, I actually then was published, I think my sophomore, junior year as like a second
Oh,
author and published research, which is again unheard of.
that's
So just
awesome.
the access to opportunity, the access to incredible education on top of a full immersive college experience, which was heavily influenced by the idea to be in a fraternity and all that kind of stuff. So it just easily made sense.
Okay, so and you graduated sociology. Um, you bring up the fraternity. Where did you come across SIGEP? I remember you
Well,
were actively involved in like committees and the third floor. We always
yeah,
talk about the third floor in the TSC,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
remember, yeah, early you were kind of very
yeah. I was
active in that
a
area.
little too eager. Well, so I graduated in both economics and sociology. So I did a dual
Okay.
degree. So I started actually in marketing because I had watched my dad, who was brilliant at architecture, but occasionally, as you could imagine, a mom and pop shop struggled at times. And so I was someone who believed in follow your bliss and money will follow and all that kind of hoo ha. But I knew to a degree that that wasn't just blatantly true. Like I needed, if I was going to, I always kind of say, if my passion was going to be river running, I was probably going to own an expedition company. I wasn't going to be a river guide for my life, right? So what
Hmm.
was the 101 of business? So I started in marketing. That's where I did my research. I remember distinctly in an accounting class, we were trying to hit a certain like bottom line, right? This certain number, and we cut 100 out of L as a variable for labor. And I just remember going, that's lives, that's families, those are community members, those are customers, those are all these things that we just impacted and we laid everyone off. And so my little bleeding liberal heart ran across the quad to Old Main and I signed up and got a sociology degree. But then again, very rationally, I was like, sociology is not a marketable degree unless I want to go and be a professor. So I actually ended up my senior year, unlike everyone else who had like 9 credits and was playing frisbee all semester. I think I graduated that spring semester with over 21 credits just
That's
to finish out
your
and get a
economics.
dual degree. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. So that was kind of the education side of it, and then I went up because of those honors programs and all that kind of stuff. I actually met the director of student involvement in one of my like summer freshman activity things or the honors groups or whatever it was. And I remember asking how to get involved. And she took me upstairs and talked me through all this stuff and basically was like, you're going to be student body president one day, and just like inspired me to be able to go and do these things. And then she actually hooked me up with Nick Gordon,
Oh,
who
okay.
was running and did homecoming. And I remember I actually helped plan homecoming for a school I had never been to. So my first thing fresh out the gate was like helping plan homecoming my freshman year, which again,
That's
I always kind of laugh. I'm like, I didn't even know what I was doing. And Nick was wonderful and was like, no, we want the new ideas. Like that's why it's helpful. And just
Uh-huh.
took this naive kid who wanted to do something and get involved. And that's how it all kind of started.
Fantastic. So this is a little tidbit for the undergrads because I learned this. You were smarter than me by taking on a major of a dual major. I did that my senior year, literally. Well, my super senior year. Um, I dual minored, but those mean nothing on a diploma. They don't show up. And I thought
No.
I was like,
Yeah.
I got a marketing and a degree in a minor in marketing and sociology. It's like to come to find out, it doesn't show in my diploma. I was like, what? Why did I waste
Yeah.
those extra credits?
Yeah. So you can
So
talk
there's a
about it. It's still education. You have the knowledge. So I had a minor in management and I think maybe psychology. But again, I don't
yeah,
even remember that at this point. So yeah.
yeah. So majors are what's important. That will show on
Yeah.
the
You can
diploma.
technically even say you have 2 degrees.
Yeah. Okay, so then you got in through Nick Gordon and you came to SIGEP. What was your thoughts of a fraternity before you joined?
Well, it's interesting because I I think part of what drew me to SIGEP was the fact that it was kind of the anti-frat fraternity. I remember even talking to my parents about it briefly, and when I was looking at it, possibly going to rush or whatever, and thinking, oh, I'm bracing for impact that they wouldn't want me to. And my mom was actually like, oh, that's incredible. And one of their good friends was Sigma Chi at the U. And she's like, oh, those are like the movers and shakers of Salt Lake. Like, that was, he still had friends and connections and business deals and all this stuff because of his involvement there. And I remember kind of thinking, well, I don't think I want to be Sigma Chi. I didn't really have interaction with them, and I had a few friends who were kind of starting in sororities. And at the same time, I can't remember, Psi Kappa Phi or something like that. There was another fraternity actually on campus trying to get founding fathers. So I was actually dueling pretty much between, do I go be a founding father of a new fraternity and set up a new thing, or do I go join SIGAP? So I distinctly, though, it was because of people like you, Nick Gordon, many others, when I stopped and looked around and said, okay, who are the movers and shakers on campus? Who are the people that is going to be beneficial to my network, not only now, if I want to fulfill on that destiny of student body president one day, and long-term relationships just in business and in life. It was very clear of everyone that I was looking at and everyone I was talking to that SIGEP had the highest quality of men on campus. Just, it didn't matter that it was a fraternity, quite frankly. It was a group of people who I wanted to be around with. And so that made the decision pretty easy.
Very nice. So right before we started this call, I was talking to Zach, and because I was trying to iron out some dates, but Zach was one of our presidents back in the day. What were some of the positions you served on? Because yeah, when freshman, I remember you're active on campus, and then with the fraternity, you stayed busy. You stayed very busy.
Yeah,
so share with the audience a little
busy.
bit about your SIGEP history and what you did.
That's a great question. I'm trying to think. I don't think I held any position, like official voting positions, until president. So I think that was like junior to senior year or whatever, and I joined freshman or sophomore, junior, or something like that. But I was involved in a lot of, obviously, any of the committees, pretty much anything that needed an extra pair of hands. I was there. So I remember doing, I can't remember if I was like one of the ritual leads, and I did a bunch of random stuff, but yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I swear you were the initial idea for the Balanced Man Triathlon. Were you on that very first committee?
Good question.
It was out.
I might have been on the first committee. I want to say, I think we did it 1 year before I did it, but I definitely ran it. Like
you were 24/7 triathlon, and I just remember it was fantastic because it was this hodgepodge event that we're like, let's do it. But then I remember the biggest thing was keeping it organized. And I came up with this. There was a folder. There was a system. I do specifically remembering you organized that sucker, and as I took over as alumni president after I graduated, I remember that footprint that you created specifically became such a resource for anybody doing it the next year and the next year. And you carried, that was a tough to come up with a triathlon as just a bunch of college kids, and the logistics between the police, the city, the college.
That was the biggest thing and then hyper hours for the pool and all of it. Yeah.
It was
I wish
fantastic.
I had those organization skills now. Still, I've lost many of those.
I don't know. We'll get to that. I think those were some footprints that continued for you on what you're doing. What if you were to look back at with SIGEP? What is an outstanding memory that just like, oh man, that was a moment?
I think there are a few of them. One of the big ones in terms of like my leadership. It was really powerful and important for me when we actually got back into Greek life, basically at Utah State. So I think part of our initial setup is that we were not part of it. We weren't paying dues into Greek Council. We didn't have a voice even on Greek Council. We didn't show up. We didn't vote, or if we showed up, I don't think we had a vote. Something to that effect. And I remember even some of the older brothers, I'll admit, right, didn't necessarily want us to. We didn't want to be associated with a certain group. But I think my big point of view is we can't change it if we're not in it. And I think that there was benefit to being part of it and to get some of those rights and to be seen and recognized by the university. And as many intramural trophies and being the number one on GPA every year, every semester, was good, but how much can you actually tout that if you're not actually still part of the group? So for me, that was one of the really big ones. And then in that same, very closely to when we got it accepted in and then becoming and being respected enough by everyone else within the Greek community to then be voted as Greek Council president, to me to me is not a signal of me. It was actually a sign of how strong SIGEP was. And that people recognized the institution and the body and the quality of men that we were, that someone like me could go up and say, hey, we've been out for a long time and you've not liked us for a long time. We're going to be in and now we're going to start running the place. So that was really big, I think, leadership wise. Beyond that, it's all the non-leadership stuff that means the most, right? It's every bonfire. It's every deep conversation. It was having my car clutch go out in Sardine Canyon and having a brother with their truck come and haul me back to Logan, right? Like those are the things that you go, this is brotherhood and this is what matters. And this is where I learned and I kind of grew up and, kind of became a man, was surrounded by and supported by such incredible people.
Yeah. So I've been going through some old archives and pictures and so forth, and there was definitely a few that stood out with me and you. Walk a mile in her shoes, like that was something we did. The purple ribbons, going around the community, going around campus, purple ribbons. There was an event. Yeah, Greg Ibsen. There were some events that they weren't huge, but they were enough, and to me they stand out as like it was more meaningful than like we're having fun, we're partying. They were emotional events for us. We obviously were a big part of like the 1 and 4 and a variety of violence, anti-rape, things of that culture. And you're absolutely right. With the Greeks, we came in with this like bullheaded, you guys suck, we're not going to join and we're going to show you, but you kind of brought that bridge back together and said, no, let's lead by example, but we have to do it from within. And that was actually a really pivotal moment, I think, for the chapters to get back in the good, I wouldn't say the good graces of the IFC, but actually with the university. I think by separating ourselves, it affected our relationship more with the university and not with Greeks.
Absolutely. And nationally too, because that was the other big thing, is we still weren't getting, we kind of would occasionally go to an event and maybe a Carlson and maybe a thing here, but I think I was also one of the first, I don't know if I was the first or not, who actually went to Ruck and was a Ruck scholar. And again, really started to try to build bridges with the national group as well and say, no, we can do this, to the point that there were some brothers, I even, one of the tough calls you have to take in leadership is let some brothers go. One was my roommate who wasn't paying dues and holding up their end of the bargain and just saying, okay, well, here's what we need to do to get back on terms with national. If we're going to be, again, like we kept playing a big game, and it doesn't mean that we weren't great people, but the validation of it, the actual credit, like let's not stop saying we're the best. Let's go be the best. Right. And I knew we could, and I knew that we were. And so that was a lot of stuff that changed at the university level, but also when it comes to nationals, building that reputation and building alumni associations with other folks and saying, hey, Virginia, listen, we are out here. We need your help, and we're gonna show you that we can do this. So
yeah, that's awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. Let's go back to you're now graduating. And did you know what you were going to be? Did you know this pathway? Obviously a degree in sociology, but yet you're smart. You're like, I got that economics degree. Where did you get to where you are today? Let's spend the next 10 years and walk us down that pathway.
So it's interesting. I knew vaguely that this world existed, but I didn't know it specifically. I didn't know anyone in this world. So when I say this world, leadership, talent development, right, as a very disciplined practice within most corporate HR functions. I remember talking to, my mind's going blank of his name. There's a professor of HR at Utah State, and I was talking to him about what I wanted to do. And he actually told me, don't major in human resources. He said it's hiring and firing, sexual harassment, pushing papers, and kind of guided me a little bit more to this idea of consulting. So from my time and network, again, at some of these national conferences and stuff, I knew guys who were at McKinsey and some other things. And so I thought I like could fill my britches and moved to New York with a one-way plane ticket, and knew I wanted to be in a big city and go do some big corporate something. And they were very kind, and I had like lunch, informational interviews with some of these folks, but I had no idea how big of a machine corporate recruitment is. Because a lot of them didn't come to Utah State, or the business school would talk about internships, but it was very vague, or like I still some days go, I don't know how we didn't know that this was what the game was.
Here,
But
take all of our
basically,
money and send us off, and not
yeah,
that
but no
connection.
idea
That
that,
connection.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
like I mean, there was some stuff locally, but at that bigger level of like talking to this consultant from McKinsey and him basically going, we filled all those spots like last September. Like the class, like there it is in tranches. We bring people in cohorts. Those offers are gone. You have missed the boat completely.
So you're in New
There
York
was
with just nothing, like you just
a
on a
dream,
whim. I
a
love it.
dream, and $3,000. So
I
I
love.
worked at Market Street Grill all summer. Like I knew
Okay.
I needed to save up X certain amount of money. Found a cheap apartment in East Harlem, and literally moved one way, plane ticket, mom crying at the kitchen table, and like, let's go do this. So yeah, so I was starting to talk to people, and what we also didn't, of course, there's no crystal ball. So that was right at the great like financial crisis.
Mhm.
So to that fall of 2008, it's now in history books probably, that there was this giant recession and this crisis that happened. And I had a roommate actually from BYU who was with Lehman Brothers at the time. And so you were watching the news, and literally Lehman Brothers goes under, he comes home, and every day we just waited for him to get his pink slip. Like, when is he fired? When is he fired? So he got really lucky and got sucked into an acquisition into Barclays, and even pulled off of his
Oh
division
wow.
and set in even deeper. But I basically watched this whole crisis with a front
Up.
row seat
Yeah.
because of him. But that also meant then that no one was hiring in New York whatsoever. Like, it didn't matter who you were, what kind of industry, like everything just went on hold. And I remember one person even said, like, I'm not saying your name to HR, even to like recommend me, because he was like, I want my name out of their mouths for any reason. Like, he did not want to be on their radar, in knowing that so many people, there were layoffs left and right, and it was just chaos. So
Hmm.
I knew though that I still wanted to stay in New York, plain and simple. So I went to Banana Republic and got a job for like $9-10 an hour. Started
Hmm.
folding clothes and seasonal. It was a seasonal position too. It was, Christmas time, and just did that. Then I got really lucky. I don't even know if this is a website that exists anymore. Monster.com was
Oh
the
yeah. Yeah.
LinkedIn back in
Yeah.
the day. That was the resume job site. And very blindly, just like posted my resume to a company, made a phone call, asked if the job was still open. And they said yes. And like 2 days later, I got in on the interview. They were at the very end of their entire interviewing process. And somehow I came out on top of all of that. So that sucked me into, was my real first job in this idea or world of leadership talent development. And it was very administrative. I thought I was going to go in and be able to be one of their coaches. They told me basically, you don't have gray hair, which makes sense now in hindsight. Like, I would never send a
Who are you?
22-year-old to go and like
Yeah.
talk to VPs and tell them how to deliver feedback, even though I knew the model and I'd been doing it all through college and I'd been doing it in scouting.
Hey,
So I
if you're
just
looking for gray hair, I got you. I know. I get it.
the beard now is full on gray. So it was good. It was humbling. I will also say that it was very humbling in the sense of like, I thought I could go do this thing. And then I just had to sell, mail packets out to other coaches who were doing the thing I wanted to do. But again, talk about another front row seat. I watched some of the best and brightest in the business, like former chief learning officers, former heads of HR for major companies that we all know, going out and delivering this stuff. And it was also when people were just starting to figure out this virtual delivery thing. And that was kind of my advantage as a young buck, going and actually helping people and giving feedback. And I think that was the one thing I was always still so in awe by, is that even if we were on a client site and I actually watched and observed someone, or
Mm-hmm.
especially this virtual stuff, I was the one giving feedback at the end of a session saying, I really like this, or here's the transition I would suggest, or here's this thing. So my opinion was still valid. And that virtual side, I really helped get people who were so foreign to this idea of a virtual learning environment. They'd spent 20 plus years in a
Face to
face-to-face
face.
environment. So was able to kind of transition some of that stuff and did that for a little while. But that's really where I started this whole thing.
So then you moved on. So you kind of got through this 2008 crisis. You lodged
Yeah.
yourself in. Was that with Bloomington that you kind of then started, or was that a different company and then transitioned?
No, that was a
Because
different company. So it was very
you were
small.
not Bloomington, Bloomingdale's.
Bloomingdale's and Bloomberg.
Yeah,
Yeah, lots of
and
blooms.
Bloomberg.
No,
Okay,
so
you
that
Bloom
was
some.
very early on. They were a UK based company. I was in the US. They were just starting to branch out in the US. There were literally two of us in the US office. And we had a network of about maybe 20 coaches across the country that we kind of managed, but they were all freelance or whatever. So again, also my first exposure to international communication, right? I literally had to quote unquote Americanize all of their content and change the S's to Z's and take out the U and color and all that kind of stuff. But even just that idea of like my counterparts, anyone who was like me doing my type of work was in the UK, and how to build relationships in this remote environment, etc. I did that for about a year. And then I knew a professor at Fordham University who taught in their MBA program, but specialized in business communications and had his own communications firm. So that's where I then did instructional design, which I don't love doing, but it was a critical, very important step for me to have, is like writing workbooks, right? Building out, have everyone come to a table and like self-facilitate a kind of like a board game, but with personality profiles and stuff. And so really got a great education in terms of bigger clients, hands-on, what is the facilitator actually, how do I build content, how do I get an idea across and communicate it to someone else who's also delivering that content. So that was really important, and unknowingly those were high-end luxury retail brands. So it was places like Tiffany and Burberry and others that, again, I had nothing to do with. It was just his clients. I was just in the background typing away on my laptop. But it was the perfect way once I then met, again, very randomly. All my networking stuff happened. None of this was overly intentional. It was like, oh, a friend I met at volleyball, like a friend who ran some little thing, and this one was actually speed dating, met someone who, knew someone, and it just like, it's all just peripheral networking. And literally he was the director of HR at Bloomingdale's. And again, I didn't go in heavy, just was like, would love to know more about what you do and kind of what HR looks like, especially at your level. And like, we just went and had a great dinner, to the point that, or it was supposed to be a drink that then turned into dinner, and we just like caught up, and like he just could tell. And I think this is one of the biggest things, especially if there's anyone listening who wants any sort of advice, don't be scared to say what it is that you want. Like, the more specific I was, the more the peoples were able to like sort everyone else out and say, here's what I can do for you. So instead of being like, oh, well, I just need a job, right? Especially even that moment of being, I could have been an account rep at some agency, and doesn't mean I couldn't have done a good job and it still wouldn't have been good. But every time I said, I want to do leadership, talent development, facilitation, coaching, like was specific, that's how I got that professor from Fordham. He was like, oh, I do that, and was so excited because he found someone else in the world who does what he did. And so few of us do this thing, right? Same
Huh.
thing. This HR director just saw that I knew it. I was passionate about it. I was most fairly competent around it, right? And so it just led naturally for him to say, hey, let me introduce you to this, or we actually have a position open. I did not even know this. Hadn't even, which was probably stupid on my end. But I hadn't gone to the job board or the career website to even see what was possible. And he was the one who said, hey, we have an assistant manager for what was called central education, so kind of corporate learning. And let's get you an interview. And he offered it. I didn't even need to ask. I didn't push it. It was just because of my initial conversations around what I loved and what I did. And that's ultimately where I like properly cut my teeth and was like in front of groups, teaching, leading. That's where I really became like started the real journey.
Yeah, you've mentioned this a few times, and I want to kind of reiterate it. Is networking, right? You're
Yeah.
somebody I've known not afraid to just go chat. You just go chat, and I love that. Like I don't care. I'll just you wear your heart in your sleeve, and you just go chat it up, and I love that. But yeah, these conversations, this networking, has kind of you say it's happenstance, you say it's luck, but if you never opened your mouth in the first place, if you never went to go meet this person or that person, go out of your comfort zone here and there.
I say happenstance in the sense that it wasn't calculated. Like I would
Okay.
never have known that on a lunch break of a volleyball tournament, I would have met the professor, right, who did
Who?
that thing. Like I wasn't
Yeah.
afraid to speak, but I also
Hmm.
wasn't there trying to like get the job, or like I never went out of my way to be like, okay, I want this job at Bloomingdale, so I need to find the person who does that thing. It
Yeah.
all was just a very natural progression. And I'm glad it looks like I have no problem talking to people. I hate it. So again, in
Everybody
terms of great
does,
advice,
but you
just
do.
go do it because I don't think I'm good at it and I don't like doing it, but it doesn't mean, as they say in improv, and that'll be part of my New York story, you feel the fear and do it anyway.
Uh-huh.
You don't let it stop you. So
Yeah. Fantastic. Wow. Okay. So you've gone corporate. Your time. Tell me briefly why. What? How did you get into Singapore? Uh, International traveler. I love other cities.
yeah,
Bangkok, Singapore. Like so many countries have these. You got New York, and coming from Utah, like New York's one level, Singapore is a whole nother level. So tell us a brief, like that transition. Why were you over in Singapore? What was your specific
yeah.
responsibilities? How was it?
That was awesome. We'll start that. It was awesome. To back up a little bit though, so out of Bloomingdale's was retail. I was running their buyer training program. I was running their intern program, new hire orientation. Like I said, just like really getting messy and figuring out what this actual career and this industry and like this job is.
Mm-hmm.
However, I also saw the writing on the wall that no one in retail had it figured out, and it was not. No one was doing phenomenally well. Amazon is just starting to come up at this time and starting to really reduce, turnaround times. We had an online division, which was pretty much its own company, and then we had our brick and mortar and stores, and it was just chaos between the two because not to get overly technical in terms of like how retail works, but as an
Who gets?
example, someone would go and buy like 5 bathing suits online and then try them on at home. How convenient, how wonderful. I don't have to go to a store and, I can do it in my bedroom, but then I would only keep one or two of them and return the rest, but to the store. And the way that it
Mm-hmm.
worked on the back end, it looked like the buyer of the swimsuits and online did phenomenally well because she got 5 sales. However, the buyer for bathing suits
Retail.
in store actually tanked because she actually got 3 returns. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone's inventory is all the way off. It's why when you see like stuff radically on sale because it was an online purchase, it's because most of those systems aren't talking to each other. So anyway, I actually helped create the buyer training program to combine on what was called omni-channel sales and try to figure this whole thing out. But anyway, through that process, I knew it wasn't right. And because of my first job I mentioned, I was part of the conversation when we would get a client, and I would look at that roster of 20 coaches and say, oh, let's send Dave to this place, let's send Zach to that place. What I learned in that very quickly was anyone who had tech or finance, we could send pretty much to any client, and they would hold credibly across the line. If you worked in retail, publishing, or any of these kind of things, what I call soft industries, which is not a technical term, you might have gone to the advertising agency, you had to stick in your own kind of world. Maybe you got over into like a Unilever, right? Fast moving consumer good and product based, but you didn't really, I wasn't going to get to go to JP Morgan, right? I was not going to be working with any sort of hedge fund. I was never going to go and work with the Googles and the Apples of the world if I stayed in retail. Knowing my long-term goal was always to do what I do now in terms of consulting, coaching, independent practice. So all of that kind of merged together nicely. And again, through networking, I knew someone over at Bloomberg. And again, very casually, multiple coffees and informational interviews. And eventually a position opened, and I got the phone call that said, hey, we want you to interview for this. So that was the diversity learning specialist. So it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. It was in the world, but I knew the jump would give me multiple things. It would give me tech, because Bloomberg on the back end is ultimately just a massive tech company. We sell terminals, right? You get sales, which is, again, one of the biggest, and it looks like it's finance, even though you aren't the traders. Those guys are talking to the traders every day. So you were part of Wall Street. So I get Wall Street, I get tech, and I also got international. And that was also, Bloomingdale's was trying to save me. And I was like, you literally can't match it. It doesn't matter how much you give me. And that job was what gave me all my international travel. So it was the first time I'd ever sat in business class. I was so far out of my depths. First time I'd ever had my own, like business credit card. And literally every 4 to 6 weeks, I was on a plane to a new international city where Bloomberg had an office, and it was highly independent. They basically said, we need you to train 100% of our managers on unconscious bias. So that was 5 or 6 years ago, and that was the topic du jour. And I just did it. And I would literally go onto our portal and book my flights and built my own schedule. And I was just going from London and Paris and LA to Hong Kong to Tokyo, Frankfurt, and just literally all over. And which is, the reason I give that detail is not to be like, oh, it was fancy, but because that's when, it was my first time ever to Asia. And so I fell in love with Hong Kong instantly. And it was kind of the New York of the East, had a good energy, was buzzy, still had some grit. And so when I got back from all of that travel, the position opened up on the actual leadership and talent development team. And that other piece, the diversity stuff, was actually in a contract position. I was not a full-time employee. So I went from full-time employment, took a bit of a risk in many places' eyes, became a contractor for a year with no guarantee of a full-time job at the end of it. But I knew that transition would set me up, hopefully, either internally or externally for what that would give me. And it worked out. So my new boss on the full leadership talent development team at Bloomberg, when I had my first year-end review, I basically said, had that career conversation. Again, I said what I wanted. Right. And I said, I want every position. And I didn't say, oh, I want to work in Hong Kong, which ultimately is what it was. But I said, I want every assignment you give me, I want all the feedback you give me to set me up to be a candidate, like a high potential candidate, to go to Hong Kong. So it also helped my manager know the kind of work to give me, the things I was looking at. So yes, it wasn't just about, oh, I want this, now help me go get it. I said it even in a way of this is the development I want and need. This is how I want you to see me through our work together. And normally that's about 18 months, right? You got to be in a position and pay back the dues in order to get something. 8 months later, said, hey, can you come in this conference room with me? And basically said, do you want to go to Hong Kong still? I was like, yes, 100% yes. Anyway, internal logistics, a second person on that Asia team left within 5 days of each other. So two of the four positions were open. They reshuffled. The leader position in the region went to Hong Kong, and so Singapore was open. So if I wanted to go to Asia, if I wanted an international post,
Mm.
Singapore was the city. So I'd never been, but basically said yes, and spent about 3.5, 4 years there, just because I
Wow.
wanted to be in Asia, and I said I wanted it, and I had great support and mentors and leaders around me.
That's fantastic. What? Yeah, that excites me because yeah, I get the whole big city vibe. I love Hong Kong. Hong Kong's fascinating. Shenzhen, Shanghai, like they're just a different. They run at a different caliber. They run at a 24-hour pace, and so the things that I'm seeing you're getting is even though yeah you're in New York and you're working at Bloomingdale's, but you talked about how you had your liaisons over in the UK. That diversity of learning other people's culture, learning what it's like to run in that environment, yet you're in the US. And then you could take it now internationally, like you say, Paris, Milan, and all these others, and you're gathering that experience on how can I affect a global customer? How can I and currently your job is training, like you corporate training, and you have that experience now that's been beefed up through not just, oh, I'm from Utah, went to school in Utah, I, and I can teach anybody in Utah. No, no, and that's kind of like just recently talked to Ted Kiriopoulos and we talked about rank in the Navy a little
Mm.
bit, and that's something you're gaining. You're not in the military. You're corporate ranking. You have learned so many valuable experiences on how to train in those cultures, and that's
Well, it's
crucial.
and it's interesting because I had a plan and it wasn't secret. People knew I wanted to go to Singapore and do Asia for 2 to 3 years. Then I wanted to go to London and do EMEA for 2 to 3 years, knowing that after like about 5 or 6 years, I would have both of the major regions plus New York on my resume that I could then return to the States or I could go anywhere and start to take on global leadership roles. And that's when I thought I was still going to stay in the corporate side. I thought I needed to be a VP or a director or a chief learning officer. Um, Fast forward, pandemic hits. Uh,
So yeah, I wanted to see, like,
yeah.
is the pandemic that affected corporate world
Well,
big time?
what's fascinating though is because Singapore is very heavily. I mean, much of its base and population is Chinese,
Hmm.
and then you're just closer to all things in Asia anyway, and connected. And so we knew we were living under the pandemic and what we called lockdown, or circuit breaker was our equivalent of a lockdown, but long before anyone else in the Western world was. And so I always kind of laugh looking back because, like, even the moment it hit New York and started to become the outbreak here, all of a sudden corporate really started to change their tune and started doing stuff. And it was like, no, we've been doing this for like 2 months.
Yeah,
We already
November.
know. And everyone came and like started
Hmm.
asking us about policies and procedures and like how we did that and help translate that. And it was even the first time when my parents were like, "How are things?" And I was like, I've literally not been outside of my home for 4 weeks. Like it was strict. You could not go outside unless it was to the doctor for groceries or to exercise. No contact with anyone else. So that was a fascinating little moment, which is also why they were somewhat successful. I think by the time I left, there were only 30 or 40 deaths in Singapore after 18 months. But also, you can imagine just mental health and everything else. It was time to
Hmm.
move on. But it was also a moment, and one of my big pieces of that is I I realized there wasn't much more to learn at Bloomberg. So my boss left Hong Kong, went back to Australia. Um, my peer became my manager, and I was just looking around globally, and I was like, I've kind of tapped out what I can do here, or at least what I would be learning. So I wring that thing dry. Um, and even trying to get to London just didn't fully make sense. And that's when it kind of became like, all right, no, I've learned everything that I can. I started to apply some bigger companies, but even it just kind of all led itself very nicely to like, no, it's time to go do your own thing. Um, and my clients now, what's interesting, it took me over 12 months to actually get a contract from a Utah client. I was working Silicon Slopes, the summit, and I was going to all these things. And I was talking to people and trying to network. Speaking of networking,
Yeah, still
total
networking.
fail here in Utah. No one wanted to touch me. Like they all loved the idea. Everyone talked about it, kept saying yes verbally, but the moment you tried to push them to something, nothing translated. My work right now is almost 100% international. And a lot of
Hmm.
that is actually because of, again, that international exposure and my cross cultural understanding. So I have a couple of clients actually in the Middle East who have hired me, but to train their US employees.
Mm.
But one of the challenges that they faced is that their local facilitators aren't like accepted here in the States. So you've got these guys from Austin and Michigan and stuff like on these calls, and that person, the language and the communication, like they can't translate it as effectively. And so my background actually unintentionally, right? I wasn't sitting here
Hmm.
going, oh, this is what I'm going to do, but it became a perfect sales pitch for me to say, hey, I know how to manage people across cultures. I know what it's like to not live in headquarters.
And have a
I
team
know how to
elsewhere.
I know how to
Hmm.
build leaders who have to over virtual, right? And even not even pandemic involved, but everyone was in that state. How do
Hmm.
you build a career? How do you advance a career when you're sitting in Austin and your headquarters, all the decision makers are in the Middle East? And I was like, oh, I can do that. I built leadership development programs across all of Asia, and our headquarters were basically New York and maybe London.
Hmm.
So again, just set me up very nicely even for the work I'm doing now today.
By the way, Dubai, love, it's such a fascinating city.
On
You've
the
been there?
list. No,
You haven't
I've
been
not.
there?
No,
Oh,
I've not done
okay.
anything
I'm,
in
I'm
the
not.
Middle
I'm not
East.
tooting my own horn, but
Toot
you
away.
said Middle East. I'm like, you've got to get to Dubai. Like
I
that is
know.
such a hub geographically to,
Yeah.
and it's fascinating. Fascinating. Same thing. It's like it's Singapore, but it's like Dubai is just this different
Wow. Yeah.
monster. So you came back to Utah, pandemic. I
Yeah.
get that. XY, so let's tell XYZ, you are your own boss. Like,
I am.
how scary, how exciting. Why
D, all
did
of the above.
yeah, what has been your experience starting this?
Yeah.
And I don't want to take up too much of your time, and you've given us a
No,
ton. So
please.
so tell me more about Expand Your Zone, or I'm sorry,
Yeah.
XYZ. I see Expand Your Zone as kind of like a tagline, which makes,
Yeah.
but like, what are you're doing corporate training, but like taking that initial step.
Yeah.
Go, tell me more on that one, because
It's an interesting one. So there were, even leaving Singapore, there were multiple things. Like I'd missed my brother's wedding, some family health stuff. Like there was Kara Swisher, who's a great journalist in Silicon Valley, didn't call it the Great Resignation. She coined it the Great Reassessment, which I really like
mm,
because that's what I did. I really had to look at my life and what was happening and where I was and my inability to get back and forth easily and what was most important. So all of that kind of led to, and I had some advisors who said, like I said, I thought I needed to be a few more ranks up
hmm
before I could go out and be credible. And enough people around me said, you know what you're doing, go do it. And also for me, it was also very low risk. So I also am not blind to the fact that I'm currently single. I don't have kids. I had enough, especially of a pandemic year with no travel. So I had a savings cushion
I was gonna say,
behind
single
me.
and no kids, you've got all sorts of money.
I've got all. So I had money and time,
Married with kids, I'm
but
poor.
more importantly, it wasn't so much money, but it was like if I don't have health insurance, or if I have to pay a lot for health insurance, or if something happens, or if I have to like the sacrifice I'm making, or like eating ramen for however long, like I can do that on my own. I'm not impacting anyone else in this decision. So
Yeah.
I set out for myself, and again, it's very similar to moving to New York. Like I knew the amount of time I had and the amount of money I would have and how long that would get me. Like I'm actually highly risk averse. Everyone thinks so many of these things I've done feel like I'm just willy nilly and exciting and go conquer the world, which I am. I have that spirit, but I'm very pragmatic in the sense of like I've told myself if I don't make 75% of my Bloomberg salary in the first 18 months, I'm closing shop. Like so I was very pragmatic too around like so many people, especially, the hustle grind culture and entrepreneurs are
Yeah.
like, no option B. Like, you got to go all in. And I've talked to some people and they're like, it took 7 years till we started to make money. And I was like, what were you doing for, like, it just, and I respect them and like totally fine if that's your thing, but like, I cannot do that. So I knew how much money I had. I knew how much that would deplete. For the first about probably 6 months, I really wasn't making any money, but I had an amazing network, and I threw my business plan out after 3 months because, again, this idea that I had for how to become the go-to guy in Utah for all this stuff, no one was biting. But I had enough people around me, and I think this is one of the other big things for anyone who is thinking about this. The challenge is you can't predict. There is no crystal ball. We love to think about what the potential is of what we want to create, or our brain goes to the failures. There's a massive gap in between all that that is untapped potential that you cannot even start to fathom what it is. And part of it is because you are not speaking as the CEO or as the founder or the person who's doing the thing. So people can't see you as that. So they also aren't bringing you opportunities. Right? No one is sitting here going, hey, Zach, I just joined this company and they could use your help doing this. Until I quit and became my own boss, then that same friend who I've had since college, my friend Megan, would never have said that. Right? So that's the other piece of it, is like, until you start to take the action in those directions, do the opportunities even start to show up? So I do think it's very lucky. I was well prepared, but it was luck. None of it was predicted. That my friend Megan said, hey, we've got this situation. We need some diversity training at our company. That has led to, I did good enough in that diversity section to then start coaching the manager of a small group that needed some stuff, to the CEO then emailing me and saying, hey, I would like your eyes on something. I've now coached her once a month. I now coach her direct reports and one of their high potentials who's going to take a new job. I basically have become the executive coach for a small firm in LA because one friend offered me one job one time, right? I would never have had them on my books. So that's some recurring stuff. Same thing, this Middle East group was my former head at Bloomberg, who she also left shortly after I did, needed some facilitation work done. I built the program that was the equivalent of what she's needing to have delivered for her US clients. Said, hey, could you do it? And I just said yes. And I now have a recurring quarterly contract with this big international firm. And again, never would have known that would have happened, especially my leaving Bloomberg. You never know with former colleagues if you're going to stay in touch or what the reputations were. And all of that. And then I've slowly have started to build, because of that now as a base, I can start to do more customized stuff of my own on top of it. So I still have my own coaching clients, still doing some custom consulting work and part-time talent partner, so to speak, with another company, a big tech company in Singapore, which has been really fun for the first year. And now that I've kind of gotten myself through year one, it's now time to go, okay, what do I want this to actually be? Because not in a bad way, but I just kind of said yes to everything.
Beggars
right?
can't be choosers.
I needed to fill my plate and pay my rent and not be eating ramen. And so now I get to really start to curate and cultivate what kind of client work I want to have. And then at the same time, it's been incredible because I literally ski every Friday. I took 3 weeks this summer and bounced around Europe and stuff, and it's a pinch me moment that I am living the dream that you kind of think, but to have done it in 12 months is mind blowing.
You deserve it, honestly. Like, from knowing you from college, like, you deserve it. You deserve the successes, and you're hitting it. You're hitting it in all strides. But you pragmatic. You're calculated to a degree. Like yes, things don't happen. Luck does happen, but it's like you were calculated. You saw your limits at Bloomberg and you jump. And the pandemic was a great pivot, especially for what you're doing. Because virtually, that's so ingrained in all of us today. Like, good for you, man. I'm so excited and proud of you and what you've done. I want to ask just a couple more questions because I am curious. this is what you're doing. You seem to love it. If
I
money was
love
no
it.
issue, if
Oh, I'd be
money was
doing
no
this.
issue, and you have all the, you're doing this. You're just going to keep going.
It is, so this actually goes, this rewinds actually back to my New York days and actually my friend Megan, who
Hmm.
was a KD. Um, we both moved to New York together somewhat unknowingly. Like it was this big pipe dream.
Hmm.
And we thought there were like multiple of us who were going. And she called me. She's like, I'm moving to New York. I was like, I'm moving to New York, August 26th, August 27th. They're like, what the heck? And so we went and did it. And we would go to dinner on our anniversary every year. And like I said, I was working retail when I first started. She went and nannied when she was starting. And like we struggled. Like most people, I don't even know if she knows this. I left, I think it was my second or third Christmas in New York with $9 in the bank account and a single packet of oatmeal in my cupboard.
Holy cow!
Yeah. And I actually, my assistant was just helping me get a whole bunch of stuff organized, and like found my tax records from those early days and to like see what I made in my first real corporate job, kind of 2011, 2012, like a 10-year gap from where
Hmm.
I was and starting out. I don't even think it was $40,000 as that first assistant job to where I am now. It's mind blowing. But I think it was year 5 when she was able to get her job at the New York Public Library doing events for some of the biggest things you could imagine in New York City, right? The library is one of the
Hmm.
big events. I mean, Sex and the City weddings happen there.
Yeah.
Um, and then I had gotten my job at Bloomingdale's, and we both looked at each other and just went, "We did it!" Like we set out to do this. This was a dream. Two kids. She's from Brigham City. I'm from Taylorsville. Like two little Utah kids came and actually did the thing we wanted to do. And I still, to this day, I love this work. I recently my first actual client was a Sigget brother. Went and did a whole all day, like all hands full day retreat. And like at the end of it, it was just like, yes, this is not only what I love to do, it's also in a way like what I'm meant to do. Like I know I have certain gifts and skills to do this thing. There definitely been days along the journey in these last 14, 15 years where I'm like, same thing going through this cut file of like, oh, maybe I could go be an account manager, or maybe I want to be a photographer, or maybe I go do this other thing. Like there have
Yeah.
been hard days, and there have been definitely opportunities to shift and pivot and do something else. But like I get excited just like talking about it. Like
Well,
if anyone even is slightly interested in what this thing is, I can easily talk for over an hour, if not for a full day, about all of this. I love it. I absolutely love
awesome. That's great. You got to do what you love, and that to me, like this whole SIGEP Success Series isn't about money. It is
No.
about success of doing what you love. To see that you would say, like, I'm living life. I get to dictate my schedule. I get to dictate my clients. And I'm doing what I absolutely love. To see my programs be implemented and developed, like that's fantastic. So, um, 10 years. In 10 years you're going to have a bunch of employees, or is this going to stay a small, independent coaching company, or is this
I wish there was a crystal
you're going to be
ball.
or are you want to be the Franklin Covey of your generation?
I don't know. I've played with both options. The challenge that going big and scaling and all those employees, it takes you right back to the corporate environment that and you know, was pretty good in, but also that was the same thing of like I would never have had this independence for me to dictate a schedule, for me to take the amount of time off I have, for me to put terms around some stuff. So um, and you would be, you know, in a good way, right? Your employees would be so needing for you to be on top of everything and for you to really show up and help create that. So if the right opportunity comes up or the right thing, but at the moment, I'm going to enjoy the next probably 2 years in a very independent way. I might. I have another good friend who's in a similar situation. She just brought on two other coaches for herself, kind of under her methodology. So it'd
Hmm.
be a very small like partnership. Um, so I think that would probably, if I do anything, it'd be that kind of next step.
Okay. I'm
I'm not
I'm gonna
ready for
predict,
80-hour
Zach. I'm
weeks.
I'm gonna predict something based off of what you said at the beginning.
Right.
Because of you're gonna continue to your success, but I think you are gonna stay small. Even if opportunity arises, I don't think you'll get too big. And the reason I predict this is that equation in finance, L minus 100, like 100, that risk that you didn't look at that as a number, you looked at that as lives, and that's heavy. Like that's a heavy.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you're not able to do that. I think you
Because
care enough
I
to
worked in
not.
HR for
you,
15
you
years. I
care
know
enough
how to.
for people to not put that risk. And like,
No,
so I think
I
that's
know
a
how to. I've guided many leaders through rounds of layoffs.
either way, man.
Yeah,
If you get huge, I'd love to see it. If you stay independent, like small, more, and it's not
yeah,
boutique. Like it's more.
yeah,
Well, I guess it's boutique because it is niche. You're
yeah,
able to be flexible, where a
yeah.
Franklin Covey is not flexible. They
That's what I
are.
do.
This is the program. This is what it is, and it fits your mold or doesn't. You can
Yeah,
mold, and I love that.
yeah,
Either
and
way, I know.
especially from no, even like the idea right now with recession looming, I can now flex and pick up other types of work.
Mhm,
So if I don't have the big corporate contract, I can go coach and just spend more hours one on one with people. And
mhm,
when things shift, I can drop most of that and keep one or two and then go do big bulk or customized work, but at scale. So it
mhm,
also is, I refer to it as my portfolio of business. So what's my coaching? What's my facilitation? What's my consulting? And eventually adding, so keep an ear out. There will be a podcast coming soon, and then of
oh,
course
awesome.
I would love to have some books and then some keynote speaking. So, but all of that to me is a flywheel that feeds other pieces of the business.
Yep.
No one of them is the business.
Correct.
It gives me the ability to interplay between them.
Okay. Love it, man. Okay. Before we close off here, two things. Share with those watching your former brothers. What do you want to? What's something you want to share to your former alumni brothers that you haven't seen in 10 years? And then second, anything to the undergrads that might chime in and listen and look into. Oh, I want to go into that corporate training like that. That is of interest because obviously we have a lot of active brothers in leadership. So that's
Yeah,
still to this day. That's how it is.
yeah. I think the biggest thing is I was correct in my sense and judgment that the people who came out of it supported me, have maintained. I think you all were incredible examples, and like that, my ability to do all of this really is quite often because I was standing on your shoulders. That ability to go and do these things and the experiences I had was because of something like as simple as it was, like the triathlon, to go and deliver this kind of stuff to run Greek Leadership Week, be the facilitator at some stupid goofy thing, or like I think we were up at the Cranny Farms and I like ran a whole retreat for a weekend, right? And was like, all right, now cross the line if you blah blah blah. And it was just like, in hindsight, it's just funny that that's still what I'm doing now professionally and getting paid to do that, when it was, I mean, talk about something I just love to do. I was doing it as an undergrad just for my brother. So thank you all for your guidance and for your help, and for also allowing me to let you be my little guinea pigs in my harebrained ideas. And then more importantly, for any and all undergrads, I think the first thing is, if you have the slightest interest in anything that I'm doing, again, because it is often very rare, please reach out. I would be more than happy to talk and share ideas and mentor and whatever it is that you might need, especially if it's this specific. But more broadly, I go back to kind of a few of those key points earlier for anyone and everyone. Like, do not give up on that dream. I think we all typically know what it is that we want to do or the impact we want to go and have in the world, especially in your 20s. Be dogged. I promise you, you can make up all of it in your 30s, even if you come out as like a total failure in your 20s. If you go and try and do this stuff, because what most people will find, or what I have found, is it doesn't, especially I help do a lot of recruitment and stuff. When you've got 10 years of experience of anything, people just see 10 years of experience. And as long as you can twist it and formulate it and say, well, I learned this, or here's what sales looks like, or here's what account rep looks like. It might not be in the perfect industry or on all these things, but like, I would much rather you put in that time, put in that effort, and see if you can't not do it. And then if you can't, fine. You'll learn a ton of stuff. You'll see the things you love to do. You'll see the things you hate to do. And there will be a career that may not be the perfect crystal ball dream that you imagined, but it'll be so much closer because of your experimentation. But more importantly, if you go and do all that experimentation, you're actually so much more likely to actually go hit your goal than to go and just do the thing that's safe because, you know, Flying J gave you the internship. So therefore you want to just go be an executive at that place. No offense to anyone who works at Flying J. But that's the kind of thing, is so often we just find ourselves in positions and all of a sudden go, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I wanted to go do that. So I'd say, go do that. And be smart, right? I was somewhat calculated, but don't be scared to not do that, because life is too short. Part of my moving back was my sister's mother-in-law passed somewhat early from dementia. My mom's sister now has cancer. Like, we had a string of my parents' friends who all passed away within like a short span of time. Like, I think they went to 3 funerals on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just about a month or two ago. Like, if you can't, this is why I do this. I do believe that the work I do makes a difference in individuals' lives, but I think that leaders make a difference in their employees' lives, that makes a difference in their families and their communities. This is like, life is meant to be lit. This is why I'm skiing every Friday, is because I can't imagine sitting in a cubicle not experiencing the wonders of this world. That's why I travel so much. Like, I just know too poignantly how precious life is. And so I can't also imagine, as part of that you don't go and do the thing that you want to go do with your life, because you only get one of them. So go do it.
Inspirational words from inspirational leader. Zach, I've loved knowing you from college, and just, oh man, what an amazing story and experience. I look forward to staying in touch a lot more now that you're in Utah.
Yes, please.
We will definitely. I know you see Tag every once in a while. He's my daily pill that I pop to laugh. Tag keeps me laughing, but I'll come up one time and we'll all go to lunch. And if you're ever in St. George, I'd love to connect with you.
Absolutely.
My home is always welcome. Thank you for your time. I'm going to stop this and we'll sign out with the brothers and anybody watching.